Breakfast delivery is available for 250 NOK per person. What the fuck? Pretty sure I can get breakfast in Oslo. How do you say Oslo in Norwegian tongue?
Oslo.
Oslo. Okay.
Oslo.
Oslo.
In Oslo, they say Oslo.
Oh, okay. Sounds the same.
Hey, welcome back to Hogwash. This is episode 3. I'm still Martin Total, and I'm still here with my good friend Mike the Lummox. Mike, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, man. Listen, I'm good. You know, we're trending in Norway. I wonder if
There's
that
no
has
way.
anything to do with your people.
There's no way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only like a few million people in Norway, so when 50 people start listening to a random podcast in the US, I guess that's trending. But I love you all. Thank you. I love that. We should do like a live show in Norway, in your hometown of Bergen. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, that would be fun. My whole family of 4 people would be there.
You have a much bigger family than that, because I can see all the people following us, you know, on Instagram, and it's definitely bigger than 4 people.
All right, okay, fine.
Fine.
But yeah, I would love to do that.
I'm not doing it. Sorry, I was just gonna say I'm not
Yeah.
doing it when it's freezing ass cold. Okay, I want some whatever 24-hour sunshine like you guys get. Wait, you guys get that, right?
We do, not really where I live, because I live in the South, or I'm from the South, but if you go further north, then yes. If you go up to like Lofoten or Kirkenes, then in the summer, the sun doesn't set.
Okay. Well, as long as I can get a whale burger or whatever. I assume they have
Sure.
really good.
I'll grill you a whale steak. I used to do that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
You
like
can
the
buy
way
it-
in my heart.
Yeah, you can buy it at the grocery store. You can buy Makey whale.
That's the only whale I ever wanted to eat. I didn't know what that was, so you just told me.
But Makey whale, that's it. Yeah. But how in the hell do you know that we're trending in Norway? How did you find that out?
I got a couple emails from some like podcast pitching services that said that, and even though yes, they have some ulterior motive to saying that, there's no way they could have known something that specific without it actually being somewhat true. You know, they must
Some
have gotten
data
some
point.
alert, yeah, from some dashboard somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Hey, I'll take it.
What else? I learned what a neck beard is.
How did you tell me about this? Did you not know what a neck beard is previously?
Well, I mean, I know I have a neck beard, but am I a neck beard?
No, you are not a neck beard, but you didn't know previously.
One.
You have one, but you aren't one.
I had an idea of what it meant just from context, you know, like Reddit and stuff like that. But no, I guess it's like a stereotype of like a douchey man that just like is kind of like a gamer, isolated type that lives in a cave and just like
unkempt, sweaty, lives on the internet, lives on Reddit, has permanent brain rot, Reddit brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you know how I thought of it, because somebody who has a beard like mine was, I don't know, maybe they had like their face in their profile picture or something, and then somebody on Twitter commented like, "You are literally a neck beard." And I was like, "Oh my god, I'm literally a neck beard too."
You aren't one. You have one, but that doesn't make you one. You're a successful guy. You have a family. You're out in the community. You're doing stuff.
Thank you. But if I don't shave, my wife said she'll divorce me, so it's going to come off next week.
But you have such a strong beard. This is the envy of lots of guys, myself included.
You know what? I hear that a lot. Like my brother-in-law is always like, "Damn, you got such a great beard. Like, how long have you ever grown it?" And to me, this is just a nuisance. Like, I don't want to groom myself. Okay, I do it because the alternative is, it's like I treat my beard the same way I treat like messes in my house, right? I will clean them, but only when it becomes so overwhelmingly compelling and annoying that it has to be done, because it's like it's gone way too far. Then it's like all right,
dealing with the mess is more annoying than having to clean it.
Yeah, so, like I'm walking on the floor and I'm like, what the hell is on my foot? Some like breadcrumbs and dog hair, and I'm like, damn, my foot's black already. All right, now I gotta clean it. That's when I shave my beard.
But so what was the context? Like somebody was insulting you, basically calling you a neckbeard?
It wasn't towards me. It was just like a Twitter argument, which is like 80% of what happens on Twitter. And somebody was like,
at least
a guy with a neck beard in his profile picture was like, "You are literally a neck beard." And I was like, damn, that hurt. That felt personal, even though it wasn't directed towards me. What else? Oh, you got a fun fact? I got a fun fact.
Let me think. You go first, and I'll think about mine.
All right. So I like to do random creative projects. They just, I don't know, I get such a dopamine hit from it. So
Yeah.
I actually wrote a rap battle, multiple rap battles between me and my wife. We're like playing, right? And between my dog and my cat. I really like the YouTube channel Epic Rap Battles of History. If you look at my Spotify, like most played 2025, it's pretty
Oh
much like
god.
those songs. Oh, one thing I wanted to do also is
Mm-hmm.
so okay, listen, we're not big yet, but we do get reach on social media with our clips, and we have been getting some trolls, and they're all not all, but most of them are from YouTube. TikTok is like the nicest place on the internet. YouTube
Really?
is a bit of a mix. Yeah, we need to come on. We need some of you people to come and say some nice stuff on YouTube. But Martin,
Mm.
do you want to read the comment that I put in our notes?
Okay, sure. So this is a comment that was left on a clip that is titled "AI is kerosene for the economy." And so here, this is left by 1979 CE. Quote, another failure trying to shit on everything because he's looking through lenses made of shit that he created with his shit life. End quote.
Doesn't even that doesn't even make sense. I saw it and I was literally like, huh? I
Yeah,
I
no, it's barely coherent.
I'm looking through lenses made of shit that I created with my shit life. Well, I'll just say
Mm,
I'm very privileged and feel very fortunate to have the life I have. I'm very grateful for it, but I don't know
hmm.
about these shit lenses. So that was Troll of the Week. Let me know if you want to see more of them.
Yeah,
Don't be one of them.
don't be one of them. Well, we thank you for leaving a comment on our YouTube. I think it's time that we get into this week's topic. We are talking about how Meta and YouTube were just found negligent in a landmark social media addiction trial. I want to briefly touch on the Natalie McNally murder trial in northern Belfast, or excuse me, in Belfast, Northern Ireland. And I know you want to talk about insider trading in oil futures just before the Trump administration announced a de-escalation in the war in Iran, how Elon Musk wants to start a chip fabrication in Texas called the Terafab, data centers in space, and how OpenAI just killed their video generation app, Sora. Mike, hit me.
There was a social media trial between a woman who's now 20 years old who claims that she's been using social media since she was age 10, which led to dependency, depression, anxiety, self harm, body dysmorphia, all the things that we know social media does, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
plenty of studies on it. It's been
Yeah.
around long enough, it's used widely enough. We know it does this.
Yeah, you can just look at people's like reported mental health stats and it's just nosediving.
Oh, yeah, not to mention amongst teens. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just
especially
not
teens. Yeah.
teens, and not just young, not just teen girls, but teen boys too. But anyway, back to the case. So
Mm.
they lost. They lost. The jury awarded 3 million in damages from both Meta and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Snapchat and TikTok actually settled, so they were in the suit, but they settled ahead of time.
That might have been a smart move on their behalf.
Oh, 100%. Because,
Yeah.
well, their name's not in the news as being guilty in this even. I mean, it's not really a matter of guilt, it's liability, but they're not considered liable for this.
Mm-hmm.
The key to this trial is a couple things. So one, the fact that they lost and the plaintiff's attorneys were able to convince a jury that these platforms are addictive and are designed to be addictive, and that the
Mm-hmm.
companies behind them knew they were addictive and did it on purpose, is going
Yeah.
to open them up to thousands of more lawsuits. That's
Yeah.
why this is a big deal. Three
Yeah.
million in damages. That's about what Meta earns in 8 minutes, and that's about what Alphabet earns in 4 minutes.
So Google. Yeah.
It's not even a slap on the wrist. Like you can't. I can't even like give you an equivalent. That's like if I found a nickel in my pocket and I just threw it on the ground. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But all those other potential lawsuits, that's the key. And
Yeah.
in the absence of regulation, which is sorely needed and missing in social media, this is kind of the next best thing, because this kind of penalty at scale, at a large enough scale, forces them to act, to change their policies so
Yeah.
that they don't open themselves up to more risk exposure. I want to talk about one of the key strategies for the plaintiffs in this case. The attorneys
Yeah.
didn't try to convince the jury that the content was harmful, because the defense for that would have been Section 230. Section 230 preempts and removes liability for internet-based companies for the content that they have on their platforms.
It basically says that they're not regulated as a publisher, right? So they're not responsible for the content that's published on their platforms. Isn't that
Bingo.
the basic like
It is
point there?
extremely antiquated and does not really match with reality these days. But yes, that's exactly the essence of it.
Can I just make a quick point on that? So I think it's a holdover from a time when basically the law said that you can't legally hold the phone company accountable for what somebody said over the phone to somebody else. Like that's where that comes from, I think. Like you can't sue, American phone companies because somebody called and told somebody else, like, hey, I'm going to come over and, shoot you or whatever.
I
And
did not
that's
know
where
that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
I believe that's the origin of it. And so like,
Sounds
internet
super freaking old.
so
Sounds like it needs
internet-based
to die.
companies internet-based companies, they want to retain this status under section 230 or whatever it's called, so that they can't be held liable or responsible or accountable for what people publish on their platforms. Because if that was revoked and taken away from them, then they're responsible for what me or you could post on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. And that opens them up to a shitload of work. First of all, it's impossible to moderate what everybody posts on social media. It's just too much of a workload. And also, they don't want all that trouble. It's just too much to be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that there are sides of it that make sense. They
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be held liable for everything that's posted on there, because moderating something that has 3 billion users, as Instagram does, is impossible at that scale. If they were going to face liability for every single post,
Yeah,
that would be a problem.
it's
But to
impossible.
not take any measures to, well, first of all, to not take any measures to moderate the content at all, which is not
Mm-hmm.
what they do necessarily, but the key is that this has nothing to do with the content. The case here was all around the fact that there's basically the companies were accused of knowingly designing the platforms to be addictive. And that
Yeah,
completely removed Section 230 from the equation. So very
yeah,
smart move on their lawyers' parts.
yeah. It's a very clever approach. It's very, very crafty. I like it.
The other part of this is like they were always going to get their ass handed to them in a jury trial. Why? Because every person in the jury uses this stuff and understands intuitively, like, yeah, this stuff is made to be addictive. These companies have not made themselves likable in
No.
any way. I mean, and look, Alphabet's PR team is a lot better than Meta's. Meta's PR team
Mm,
is like they have a lot of great lobbyists. I mean, they're
yeah.
great at getting regulation through or not through that
Mm,
benefits them. But
right.
their PR team has, I mean, just the Meta glasses alone, they're basically seen as like not just the company that doesn't act with integrity, but they also kind of showcase what it looks like when a company of that scale with that kind of platform and that kind of algorithm and those number of eyes on it, what it looks like and how much harm it causes when they don't act with integrity. And we shouldn't be expecting companies to act with integrity. Like, this is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Business is a game that you do anything you can to win within the
Mm-hmm.
bounds of the law. And some people disagree with me on this. They're like, no, 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 you should be a good citizen of the world as a CEO.
Yeah.
Bullshit. I blame elected officials for having no guts, no spine, no knowledge. I mean, some people in our Congress are so fucking old. They don't even understand this shit. I really blame elected officials for not having any regulations on this. But the key in this case is this has been a long time coming. In the absence of that regulation, the next best thing is legal damages. And I really hope that this happens all around the world. I don't want it to get wrapped up in some kind of class action lawsuit where they can pay one lump sum. Lawyers
Mm-hmm.
get 70% of it, the class gets 30%, and then that's it. They have like a fixed amount they have to pay. I
Yeah.
think that for them to really change how things work, this has to be like a very, I don't want to say an existential threat to them, but something that will materially impact their bottom line.
Really hurt them in the wallet, basically.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're just like, I mean, when you use social media, we know how they design it. We are the lab rats. We're the lab rats with a little fucking lever that gives heroin, but not every
Mm-hmm.
time. This is key. It doesn't give heroin every time. It
Yeah.
gives it one out of like 50 times, which is
Randomly. Yeah.
worse. That's
Yeah.
worse for your brain. And they know that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a variable reward. So what is that in practice? Scrolling. Maybe
Means you
not this
keep
video,
trying.
next video. Yeah, you keep trying. And that is like playing slot machines with your brain, and they
Yeah.
fucking know it. And
Oh, of
everybody in
course
the
they know it.
jury knew it.
Yeah. Everybody in the jury knew it because they probably have experienced it themselves, or they have a child or a niece or a nephew who's addicted to their phone, and they see how they spend just hours and hours and hours on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, just looking at shit that's just giving them brain rot. And they know this stuff is designed to be addictive. The design of the platform and the functions by which the user interfaces with the platform is that it just hooks you and pulls you in and kind of diminishes your attention span and just makes you go, what's next? What's next? What's next?
I'm so glad to see this, but there's no getting around it. Like, one thing that I
Yeah,
will always mourn is that there is a generation of people in the world who are between the ages of 13 and 28, who
yeah.
basically grew during their formative years, spent probably more time on their phone than they did doing anything else.
With friends, like face-to-face interaction.
You and I are lucky that we kind of like we're just old enough that we kind of
Yeah,
skipped that, and we got to kind of grow up before. So like when Facebook was public, 2004, and like it wasn't really widely available. Was it? I don't think it was widely available at the time. It was kind of like
yeah.
invite only. It was MySpace. MySpace wasn't nearly that addictive.
No,
Um,
no.
and then it just got more and more addictive over time. The amount of time people spend on Instagram keeps going up. I mean,
Yeah,
these are growing companies. I mean, they're
yeah,
growing, like, somehow Instagram has 3 billion users and it's still growing like 3%, which may not sound like a lot percentage wise, but numbers wise, that's a lot of fucking people.
yeah.
Not to mention the number of people using Instagram every day. 65% of those 3 billion monthly users use it every day.
That's
So,
insane numbers.
yeah.
That's
So
fucking crazy.
yeah.
But also, is it okay for me to say this? You're a dad. Are you okay with me putting
Yeah.
that out there? Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
got that
you're a dad.
big dad energy. Yeah, bro.
You're a dad, big dad energy. You have a boy. He's going to grow up to be of the age where he probably is going to ask you for a smartphone. Do you want him to spend all his hours just sucked into an online platform, just doing this shit and not talking to people, not learning how to make eye contact? You got to be thinking down the road with this shit. Like, no, you don't want your kids to get sucked into the I don't know, what do you even call it? The hive mind of the internet like that.
I have two minds on this. I mean, to your point, absolutely not. I will do everything to keep him away from it. I will
Yeah.
give him a dumb phone, a burner phone. I will
Mm,
give I don't care. Like, I'll give him a fucking Palm Pilot if those things still work. Okay. Like,
yeah.
you will not have a smartphone. And I know that's hard. And I do wonder if there are kind of second order effects to that. Like, if he doesn't have a smartphone and is
Yeah.
therefore not digitally mobile native, or mobile digital native, however you want to say it, is
Yeah.
that going to negatively impact him in some way? Is that going to make him less viable for the job market? But
All right.
I keep coming back to the principle of, I don't think there's anything better that somebody could do to predict their own success than to
Mm-hmm.
have a healthy mind and a lot of self-esteem. And if I look at it that way, it's kind
Yeah.
of a no-brainer.
And also to be well socialized and have good social connections and strong social bonds with friends and family. And yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's worth
exactly.
so much more than just this phone addiction. But
Yeah.
do you mind if I go on a quick tangent here or a quick digression, because it's related to what you've been talking about?
Martin, Tangent is my middle name and my last name.
Yes, and my last name. Yeah, so do you know who Jonathan Haidt is? He's
Yes.
an author and social psychologist. He's a professor at New York University. But 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago today, he released a book called The Anxious Generation.
Mhm.
And he put out a statement about it today, and he said it was published in a very different world. And the book was basically a science and study backed rundown of all the ways in which a phone based childhood leads to bad outcomes, like mental health outcomes are just diving off a cliff, especially for young people, like teenagers, especially girls. I think they're a little bit more affected, like on average, than boys are by constant social media use. And so he said that when he released his book, the most common objection he got from other people was that everybody felt like they just had to resign to this world in which everybody's addicted to their phone, especially kids, and you have to give them a smartphone, otherwise they're going to feel left out. People said things to him like, that train has left the station, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, and also it's like, it's how kids connect today. But he had a success with this book, and it's kind of turned into a social movement. And he says that today the world looks very different. And he says that if all of our kids were on a train and we learned that the train was heading towards a collapsed bridge, us as parents would find a way to stop it and bring them safely back to the station. And I feel like that's what's happening now. So he talks about the verdicts that you mentioned against Meta and YouTube. He says it's a great day to reflect on the capacity of people in democratic societies to take action, even when opposing some of the most powerful corporations in history. People are using the courts to kind of make their points that we don't want these kids to be able to have access to addictive social media platforms. People are pushing school districts to ban smartphones in the classroom, make the entire school day totally smartphone free. And so he says that we need to protect our kids more online and less in the real world. We need to bring back unsupervised play between children that doesn't have adults sitting at the park bench and just watching them and make sure they don't get into a conflict or whatever, or that they're not, hurt or worried or awkward or something's going, a little bit differently than what they thought. And so Jonathan Haidt is kind of leading this movement called I guess it's named after the book, the Anxious Generation Movement. And it's really all about like how people are saying we need to take back childhood for our kids, get them off the phones, get them off the screens, get them outside along other kids that are their age so they can play unsupervised and just kind of learn how to be well socialized people among other, peers. And I just think that this is a great silver lining. Like, yeah, we've had, 15 years at least now with this like experiment that none of us really consented to run on us, on our brains and that of our children. And people are waking up more and more to really the destructive nature of the design of these platforms. It's my brain versus the supercomputer at Meta headquarters. I'm going to lose.
Exactly.
And I'm 38. A fucking 15-year-old doesn't stand a chance. So, yeah. So this movement of parents going like, no, sorry, you can't have smartphones. School saying no smartphones the entire school day. There was a story in the New York Times recently about how school districts in New York have banned smartphones. And they're like, kids are playing cards during lunch breaks. Kids are playing on the playground. They're not just sitting looking at their social media apps. It's really, really like a positive movement out there. And I think more and more people need to join it. So I just wanted to toss that in there as a counterweight and a silver lining to, the stuff we've been living for the last decade.
Well, first of all, you as a parent, you can only do what you can do, right? My wife and I have different views on this, but like I believe that I remember me. So when I was growing up, my dad was always working and he did that because that was his way of taking care of us, showing us love. He was very, very, very ambitious.
Yeah.
But he was gone. And my mom was gone. When I was young, my mom wasn't with me. My parents separated.
Yep.
And I kind of just did what I wanted because there was nobody to tell me not to. If I had had a phone and the kind of, not just a phone, but like the kinds of apps and stuff that we have today, I don't think I would have just stayed inside literally all day because there was nobody who would have told me not to. And they would have probably been either ignorant or just too busy to address how dangerous that is for your brain chemistry. So, to your point about schools, most schools now have cell phone bans during the day. Like I think 55% or so have like bell to bell cell phone restrictions. And you know what? Like you said, those kids are happier. I think that, as much as I did bring that up, that small fear of what happens if they're really not able to gain these like, digital skills or whatever for a world that is largely digital. And then I kind of like brought myself back. You know what? That's way less important than their self-esteem being intact, their brain being mature enough to be resilient, to handle difficult conversations and rejections, all the things you learn only by being with other people, which you don't do online. Plus, aside from the addiction, the more you expose yourself to negativity, and let's be honest, they literally trade in negativity. That is their product in a sense.
Of course.
What's the stuff that goes the most viral? Happy videos? No. Occasionally somebody saved a penguin from fucking oil spill or something. I don't know. And maybe that'll go viral or something, but by and large, it's just controversy. It's
controversy,
really controversy.
rage bait, negative stuff. Yeah.
The ad-based business model, especially for something like that has that kind of targeting and that much information about us, is
Yeah.
poison. And I really believe this. Social media is poison to society. Now, I already hear people saying, "Well, you fucking use it." Yeah, I do use it. I use it because I'm an adult man who didn't grow up with it. We have a
Hmm.
podcast, we need to promote it, and those are still powerful tools. They can be tools for good. They don't have to be poison for society, but as they
Hmm.
are, they're poison. They
Yeah.
aside from everything else we just talked about, just think about this. Why is it that in general, like in the United States, things aren't
Hmm.
perfect here, but I want to talk about how people are even leaving the United States in droves, especially in retirement.
Yeah.
Things aren't perfect here, but by and large, the quality of life here is probably better now than it probably ever has been. And
Yeah.
yet people aren't as happy. Why? My theory on this, and I'm sure I could find quality data to back this up if I wanted, but my theory on this is very simple. You go online, you see how rich everyone is, how many great things they're doing with their lives, and then comparison is the thief of joy. That's what it is.
Compare and despair.
Yeah. I really think people's general feeling about themselves is based on their two things. One, their own trajectory. For example,
Yeah.
if you earn a shitload of money, let's say you earn $50 million, right,
Hmm.
last year, but then this year you only earned 20 million. How would you feel? You're still fucking
You'd feel
rich.
like a failure. You
You'd
went
feel
down
like shit.
in average earnings like 30 million, or not average, but you would like decrease by 30 million. You're still
Exactly.
rich by any
60%
standard.
down.
Yeah. Any standard that you can measure that by, you're still rich. You still have a ton of money. You don't want for anything. You're not suffering. You have more than most people in history have ever had. But because the line graph went down a little bit, it's like shit. I didn't do as well as next or last year.
I believe that someone's personal trajectory is probably the single biggest indicator of their happiness. Conversely, if you went from earning, I don't know, let's use another crazy number, from like $100,000, $200,000, I mean, you feel like a god. It
Yeah.
and
Oh,
it,
yeah.
it it doesn't really matter what income level we're talking about. It's about the trajectory. Now, here's
Hmm.
another thing. There's a book by an author I really like. He used to be a high level executive at Google, Mo Gadot. He has a book called Solve for Happy, and he says that even when he was at Google making a shitload of money, I mean,
Yeah.
he had Google executives get paid, okay?
They get
He had
fucking paid. Yeah.
he had
They make
everything you could
bank.
dream of, but I think he was living in Dubai, I think, and or somewhere in the UAE. Maybe
Hmm.
it was Dubai, maybe Abu Dhabi, I don't know. But he was
Yeah.
living somewhere where there was a lot of rich people, and he
Yeah.
always felt like he never had enough.
Because he was comparing himself to them.
Exactly. His message is don't look up, look down. Not look down like condescending, but look down like to recognize how good you have it and
Yeah.
how grateful you should feel every
Yeah.
day. And social media completely strips us of that ability.
Hmm.
In fact, it gives us a completely false sense of
Yeah.
what others have. I mean, it's hard for people to imagine, but I do remember back in the 90s what it was like to just live in a little neighborhood and there was no social media. Maybe you were trying to be a little bit better than your neighbors, but you weren't walking around every day feeling like you were inadequate.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, cool. We all live here. It's kind of like similar income,
Or,
similar homes, similar
yeah.
lifestyles. Everything's kind of similar. Like we feel okay. We have our duties, our sense of duties. We take care of our families, and that's good enough.
But and especially if you're a teenager, you're going through these formative years where things are changing, and maybe you're unsure of yourself or your place in your social circle, or your place in the world, and what you're going to become, and are you good enough? All these things. Giving a teenager a smartphone with social media on it is just like supercharging that like negative self image and feelings of self worth. It just fucking tanks it. There's just no two ways about it, I think, at this point.
The last thing I want to say on this, just to kind of hammer home the point of how damaging this is, especially to young people, but to everyone, is that this is according to JAMA, the Journal of American Medicine Association. In the US, teens who spend more than 5 hours online per day are 64% more likely to have attempted suicide than
Mm.
those spending 1 hour or less. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, insider trading with the Trump administration, the people in the White House.
That's not
This
happening.
is
How dare you
this
question authority?
This is something that most people have kind of suspected for a while, but I think there hasn't really been irrefutable proof until now. But here's what
Hmm.
happened. On Monday, about 16 minutes before Trump announced that the the US and Iran had productive conversations and used the words a complete and total resolution of our hostilities, there were hundreds of millions of dollars, about $580 million of oil trades that were placed. Now, this was before 7 a.m., a
Hmm.
time in the market when it's dead. There is no activity. So this was very evident. And whoever made those trades made a lot of money or
Hmm.
saved themselves from losing a lot of money. Oil prices dropped 10% just a little bit later, right after Trump made the announcement. Very
Okay.
curious timing. It's almost like somebody knew this was going to happen. Now, here's the thing. I've long had suspicions of this, and I think a lot of people have, because last
Yeah.
year, especially when Trump was going crazy with tariffs, he would be like, okay, 50% tariffs across the board, blah. And then the markets would be like, oh my God, what the fuck? And then the next day or 2 days later, he'd be like, okay, actually, we're going to give these countries another 90 days to come to the table and blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. And then the markets would go back up. We always suspected that somebody knew that was happening and could, place trades accordingly, right? Either going to buy or
Hmm.
sell oil futures or stocks based on whatever he's going to say. But it wasn't really like any kind of smoking gun. This is a smoking gun. Somebody knew.
Okay.
Somebody
So,
inside had to have known. There is no other explanation for this.
so I
The
need
only
to ask you a
question is
couple of
who.
questions. I need to ask you a couple of questions because I assume that if I don't know a couple of details here or don't understand a few parts of the story, then maybe somebody's listening who doesn't quite know what some of these things mean. So, what are futures as it pertains to oil? Talk to me
It's
about
it's
futures.
it's basically just a security that a lot gives you a contract to buy oil at a certain price in the future, right? So if you buy it, you basically lock in a certain price now, and then the value of that, goes up or down depending on what the actual price of oil does after. So if
Yeah,
I buy futures for oil at like $90
a
a
barrel.
barrel right now, and it goes down to $80 a barrel, my futures are losing a lot of money, right? They're not
Yeah.
worth as much. And so it's really, don't worry about whether I don't say to everyone listening, don't worry about what a future is. It's basically like, think of it like an oil stock, right? For lack of a better term. It's just
Okay.
something where some kind of security that you can trade that has a value that's tied to oil.
Okay. And so are the markets even open at 7 a.m. Eastern? How can you place $580 million in trades
The
that
markets aren't
early?
open, but there's well, the US markets aren't open, but there's the pre-market, there's the overnight market, there's foreign markets. So, there's plenty
Okay.
of markets are 24 hours a day. If you
Okay.
have the right tools, you can trade, you can make money.
Okay.
And I think the key is here that it was so blatant and obvious. Whoever did this fucked up. Because
Hmm.
if he had given the speech 3 hours later, right, 10 a.m. Eastern, there would have been probably no suspicion because there's so much market activity at that time, especially on a Monday, because there's
Yeah.
all these trades going through that are activated automatically and stuff. So nobody would have noticed. At
Yeah.
6:45 a.m. or whatever it was, 6:50 a.m., it was obvious. And here's the thing that I love about this. It doesn't matter what they do now. It doesn't matter if they don't ever repeat this mistake again. That smoking gun is permanent. One day, somehow, we will figure out who was behind this. The only question
How?
left is who. The same way the SEC invests all kinds of insider training. The same way they got Martha Stewart in prison. I mean, they have the ability to investigate this stuff. They could, find what was traded, which exchange it was traded on, who the hell owned those shares. And I mean, it's not like it's a pretty clear trail.
But
It's not
isn't
like you
that
could do this in
is that
secrecy.
is that information public already if we already know that it happened? Or do we just know that it happened, but we don't know any other details surrounding
There are
five
there are
hundred and eighty
some there are
million
some
dollars
pieces of
worth?
public information that you might be able to see, but it's not guaranteed that it's public. But for the SEC to find this out, it's really not that hard. This isn't like crypto, and this isn't like something you can do in secrecy. Like, so it's just a question of who's going to enforce it. It's not going to be this SEC,
I was going to
but
say, yeah, not under
maybe.
this current administration. That would be like them, investigating themselves, I would assume. Because this has to
Exactly.
be somebody with insider knowledge, right? Somebody who knew that Trump was going to say this.
100%. There is literally no other explanation. You couldn't possibly have been that right. at that time
Yeah.
when nobody else was trading and you were the one person who just got this fucking divine inspiration to do this. No.
Yeah.
Like, and that's how the SEC goes after insider trading. They look for anomalies. This is not just an anomaly. This is like the mother of all anomalies.
Yeah.
And so,
But
like I said, I just want to
this
see justice here. I want to see them. They fucked up. They backed themselves into a corner, and they'll never get out of it. They better pray that Trump pardons them, whoever they are, preemptively.
Well, so this also fits into a pattern. I mean, there were people placing bets on the fact that Maduro would get deposed of power in Venezuela, like the day of, I think, or the day before, Delta Force operators went into, what was it, Caracas in January and abducted him and took him to a court in New York and, locked him up. There have been lots of people making bets on Polymarket and on Kalshi pertaining to things that the White House does, where only somebody on the inside could have had information about how those things were going to turn out. They make an account a couple of days before, they place the bet, it turns out exactly the way they predicted, they cash out, and then the account gets deleted. Like the length of Caroline Leavitt's speeches from the podium at the White House, press briefings, things like that. These things have been happening.
Obvious one. That was like, that was just so weird and obvious, and
as it should be.
So you know what? They better hope they get a pardon preemptively, whoever this is, and
I probably will.
I just want to see.
No, that's administration. They probably will.
I don't think they will, because I think that then that would be admitting that they did something. And look, I'm not like an expert on politics, so I don't want to present myself as such. But one thing that Trump does often is he lets people do shady shit, knowing about it, allowing them to, and then when it's convenient for him, decides to use that to hang them. He did this to Kristi Noem. He knew he had to have known that she was doing that bullshit with self-dealing a DHS advertising contract to
for like
one of her
$200
friends.
million.
Yeah, right. It was just a bullshit like use of money anyway, but then to give it to your friend,
whose company was incorporated 8 days before the contract went out. It was a no bid contract, I think.
Yeah, and is the husband of somebody who works for her.
Yeah.
So, like, he probably knew about that, but then when things started to get a little sideways for her, then he was like, okay, we're going to use that as pretext to get you out of here. Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. Yeah. Even though he acted like he didn't know about it. But then when the time came, oh, so you were doing this? Here's your noose. Go hang yourself. So I don't know. I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Martin, tell me about the murder case of Natalie McNally in Belfast.
Okay, so let's travel across the pond. We're going to Belfast, Northern Ireland. This is about a woman named Natalie McNally. She was a 32-year-old woman who was living in the town of Lurgan in County Armagh in Northern Ireland. And she began dating a man named Stephen McCullough in late 2022. They met on the app Bumble, which was, or still is, I guess, a dating app where women are set up to make the first move and first point of contact with the person that they're interacting with. Things moved quickly between Natalie and Stephen. They met in August, and by November of 2022, Natalie told her family that she was 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy, and that Stephen was the father. So it seemed, like two people had fallen in love and that they were a growing family. But then just a couple of months later, on December 18th, 2022, just a week before Christmas, everything came apart because Natalie was discovered murdered in her apartment. So on December 18th, sometime between 8:50 and 9:30 p.m., Natalie was attacked in her home. So it was a pretty bad assault. She was beaten, she was strangled, and she was stabbed multiple times. The police found her body the next day, and she was face down in a bowl of dog food. And so she died, and obviously her unborn son died. And it was a tragic, horrible thing that happened. And as it often happens in cases where a woman is a victim of violence or of, homicide, the main suspect is often the husband or the boyfriend or somebody who is a close male relation in their life. And so Stephen McCullough quickly became the prime suspect, but he had an alibi. So he told police investigators that he was actually live streaming during the time that Natalie was murdered. He ran a fairly popular YouTube gaming channel called Vote Saxon 07. And during the time window where Natalie was killed, he was live streaming from his home. He was playing Grand Theft Auto. He was drinking. He was vaping. He was answering questions from people in the chat. He was making jokes and interacting with people. He's wearing a Santa hat. And the live stream was called Violent Night, as a play on Silent Night, because it was right before Christmas. And he showed up to the wake.
That's a dark detail given
I know, right?
Circumstances,
yeah. And so, he showed up to the wake. He was a grieving partner. He was, heartbroken for the death of his girlfriend and their unborn son. But, things seemed like they weren't quite adding up. And thanks to the relentless efforts of the detectives of the police, they were able to look at CCTV footage showing a man with a backpack traveling from the town of Lisburn, where Stephen lived, to the town of Lurgan, where Natalie lived, and arriving at the street where Natalie lived just before 9 p.m., so right in the middle of that time window where her death occurred, and leaving right after the time window where she died. And
sounds like a really dumb criminal, but okay.
Yes. But, he had this live stream. He's on camera, like talking to people in the chat. He's playing games. He's on camera as being like, hey, no, I was in my apartment. You can see all the shit behind me. I'm here. I'm talking to people. It's a pretty airtight alibi. But then the trial just wrapped up this month, actually. It's just a couple of days ago. The prosecution kind of had their smoking gun, as it were, and a digital forensic analyst for the prosecutors, they had been able to figure out that the entire 6-hour live stream that Stephen had set up was a fraud. He had pre-recorded the 6-hour session 4 days earlier, and on the night of his murder, or of the murder of Natalie, he had played it. He had played the recording and scheduled it to broadcast as a live stream. So every joke and every drink he had and every hit of the vape pen, jokes and interaction with fans in the chat, everything was premeditated and set up as an alibi so that he could go kill his girlfriend and their unborn child. And this actually just marks the first time that we know of that somebody had used the cover of a live online gaming stream as an alibi for being accused of murder. When the jury retired to the chambers to deliberate, it's bad when they come back quickly, because it means they're all pretty much in agreement immediately. So the jury just took 2 hours to reach the verdict. And just a couple of days ago, on March 23rd, Stephen McCullough was found guilty of the murder of Natalie McNally and their unborn son, and he received a mandatory life sentence. And yeah, it's the first case in legal history, supposedly, where a killer used a pre-recorded live stream as an alibi. But the fact that it was pre-recorded is proof positive that the murder was premeditated, basically. It wasn't of the heat of passion. It wasn't like a spur of the moment. They got into a fight. No, he went there explicitly to kill her.
Yeah, this is so tragic. I mean,
she
was pregnant, 15 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
And just it's just, what kind of psychopath do you have to be to go and record a 6-hour thing?
Because it means he was planning it.
Like everything's normal. Hey, we just make all these fake jokes and blah, blah, blah. And as I understand, his channel was very popular, relatively speaking. I read tens of thousands of subscribers. This wasn't some hobby project. This is bigger than that. And ostensibly they didn't notice anything off either. So I mean, really insane behavior.
But the fact that he had pre-recorded it and set it to live stream during the time window where he took public transportation And in the UK, if you're taking public transportation, you're on surveillance cameras. You're being recorded on the station for getting on the bus or getting on the tram, the train, whatever.
The
He
irony of understanding how well the internet and streaming works, but not how well the real world works, I
and the
guess.
digital surveillance that's definitely going to like catch him on camera coming and going during the exact time window where the coroner decided this is when she must have died. And um it's just like obvious that this was then premeditated. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't in the heat of the moment, anything like that. But it actually reminds me of somebody that we went to school with. Do you remember the story of Kenneth Saul?
Yep, I remember good old Kenneth, I
Good
say
old Kenneth, yeah.
sarcastically.
Kenneth was, just a quick aside here, but Kenneth was one of my housemates and fraternity brothers during college. You met him at least a couple of occasions, even though we didn't go to the same
I
campus.
was an honorary Alpha Chi Rho member, I
That's
think.
right. Yes,
Although
you were.
nobody's ever told me that, I just gave that to myself, but yeah.
That's fine. I'll allow it. As a member of the founding class, I will allow it. But Kenneth, he, after years after we graduated from college, he was working as an accountant in New Jersey, and he became romantically and sexually obsessed with a female coworker, and without
He
her
was
knowledge,
married, though.
Kenneth was married and he had a child. He had like a 1 or 2 year old daughter, I believe, and became obsessed with a female coworker. And without her knowing, he had copied her keys, gained access to her apartment, and he had set up hidden cameras in her apartment. And then one day when this lady came home, I think her name was Carolyn Byington, she came home from work during her lunch break to eat lunch at home and discovered Kenneth in her apartment fiddling with the cameras that he had set up there. And instead of just, running out of there or, trying to pretend, I don't know, whatever, he attacked her and he bludgeoned her and he strangled her. And I think she had some stab wounds. And I think he received something like 50 years in prison. And
This is depressing, Martin. Like, this is,
yes.
I mean, no, this is, goddamn, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's just like every time I hear about stuff like this, it's really depressing. Kenneth is probably the closest person that I've ever been to knowing someone
Somebody's a
who's
murderer.
done
Yeah.
something like that. But
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's just like, it, you just think about like I've been in, I've had my father died,
Yeah.
and my dad was like my best friend
Yeah.
and like my world, and the pain of losing someone for any reasons is a pain that never goes away. It just leaves a hole in you.
Mm-hmm.
Like part of you is just torn, and it heals, but it's like never really fits back the same way.
Yeah.
Me and my dad, it's like I feel like I have a black cloud will follow me around everywhere. It's
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how much worse that is to know that someone was taken from you by a murderer
Premeditated killer. Yeah. Exactly.
prematurely for no reason, and to know that they suffered,
Yeah.
like the way that these people die. I mean, it's just, and then there was a baby involved.
That makes it
Anyway,
so much worse.
can we move on? This is just, I
We can
can't.
move on,
I
but
don't have the emotional strength to deal with this. Go ahead. Finish
okay,
your thought.
we can move on, but I wanted to talk about it because I thought it was interesting that it was the first case, at least that we know of right now in legal history, where somebody used a pre-recorded live stream on the internet as an alibi.
So the moral is, don't use ChatGPT to plan your murder.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's move on to something sunnier.
Let's talk about Elon Musk, our favorite asshole. He said in Austin last week that he's going to start a chip production company in Austin. That's a joint effort between Tesla, SpaceX, and xAI, which is now owned by SpaceX, called the Terafab. The goal is to create a chip fabricator that can have all the equipment necessary to build chips of any kind, a very lofty and unspecific goal. His reasoning is that the semiconductor industry is too slow to keep up with surging demand for chips. And he said, we either build the Terafab or we don't have the chips. And we need the chips, so we build the Terafab. Sound logic.
Perfect. I love it.
For Elon, this is now my editorializing here. He needs chips to power robo-taxi Teslas They're humanoid robots called Optimus, which is a dumb name,
Mm-hmm.
terrestrial data centers, and his proposed data centers in space. And data centers in space was his reason for merging xAI with SpaceX. That was the whole idea of like, wait, how do these two misfit puzzle pieces fit together? Oh,
Yeah.
xAI needs data centers and SpaceX can make them in space. So there's a perfect union, I guess. But really
What?
the real reason for the merger was that xAI is burning through cash. Like it literally just, dumped fuel on it and set it on fire. And
Yeah.
SpaceX actually is cash flow positive. And so basically merging them together is it's like, it's like taking a whole pile of manure and just putting it into a golden palace. And SpaceX is that golden palace. That's essentially what's happening here. And he always does this. His companies always intermingle in ways that public companies, or well, only one of them is public, but the other one's about to be public, in ways
Yeah.
that public companies just shouldn't do. But that's what he does. He likes to shit where he eats, and that's what's happening. But anyway, back to the Terafab. He wants to produce chips that can support a terawatt of energy production in space data centers. How much is a terawatt? About 1 billion NVIDIA B200 chips, according to Barron's.
1 billion.
1 billion. This is what Elon does, comes up with an extremely lofty visionary goal and acts like everyone else is too stupid to do this and nobody else has thought of this stuff and only he's thought of it. And then
Yeah.
basically uses that to continue getting investor money, both from public markets and from private investors.
Yeah. And so let's say you were to build a data center in space. Doesn't that just make like maintenance and upgrades or any repairs or replacement or upgrades of or of chips something close to impossible?
Yeah. So let's talk about data centers in general and data centers in space. So
Yeah.
firstly, let me back up a sec. Just for Earth living data centers, Earth residing data centers. Bloomberg says that US data centers are expected to double energy usage by 2033. And they found that electricity costs are 267% more in a month compared to 5 years ago in areas near data centers. So this is sort of the genesis for why they need to bring data centers into space, because nobody fucking wants to live around a data center because of those reasons and others. It also creates like a toxic wasteland around it, and it's ugly as fuck. And I know that Texas isn't known for its beauty anyway, but like it doesn't need help. No, so listen, I live in California. I can say that. I can
Yeah.
say that. I can say that about any place in the world, save for like Brazil and like, I don't know, maybe New
Yeah.
Zealand or something. Okay. But you were asking about why data centers in space.
Yeah.
A proposed solution to the data center problem on Earth is data centers in space, which essentially has access to unlimited energy from solar without damaging the planet and menacing society. So it seems like a good idea on the surface, but it's not like, in theory, it's not impossible to put data centers in space. There's a company called Star Cloud that is proposing doing it with solar panels that are 4 kilometers long. Okay.
Jesus.
4
Yeah.
kilometers long.
Yeah.
That's like, I wanna say
2.5
that's
miles. About two and a
yeah,
half miles, I think.
2.8 miles. Wait,
Yeah.
2.4 miles. You're right. 2.4 miles.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you were close. You were righter than I was. Anyway,
Okay. All right. I'll take it.
so how the fuck do you get that into space without causing a 50 satellite pileup? I mean, these are the kinds of questions that they have to solve, because right now there are no rockets that can take something that big into space. SpaceX is working on a larger rocket that should be able to bring stuff like that into space, but it's still going to be a huge pain in the ass, and we don't know how far away that is. That rocket that SpaceX is building has seen some some struggles. Elon thinks that the Terafab can start producing chips by early 2027, even though similar projects take a minimum of 3 years. So this is just typical Elon shit, thinking that everyone else is so dumb and he's a narcissist and like nobody else is smart enough to speed up timelines, even though there's unprecedented demand for chips. And honestly, like that's kind of been his MO for forever, since X.com. His idea is, I'm going to go into these big old dumb industries, bring in my intellect and overhaul them. And that worked for X.com. It worked, where it revolutionized personal finance
Yeah.
and
You're not talking
payment.
about Twitter, with Twitter that became X.com. You're
Sorry, no,
talking.
this is the one that merged with PayPal.
Yes. Back in
Yeah.
like the 90s, I think, or early 2000s.
And same thing with the car industry and Tesla. I mean, granted, wasn't a founder of Tesla, but
Yeah.
the idea of like, okay, these car companies don't get it. They don't see the value of this. They don't see the market for this. I see it. It has worked for him to do that. Even the space industry. I mean, that is the kind of the same in mold as what I just described. But
Hmm.
this is semiconductor industry is different. Okay, Nvidia is not the most valuable company in the world by accident. Not to mention even some of their contemporaries like Broadcom. I mean, Broadcom is, I'm pretty sure as of today, Broadcom's worth more than Meta. It's literally like a $1.5 trillion company or more. Like these
Okay.
semiconductor manufacturers are no joke. Surging demand creates that. But I
Yeah.
get his need for more of it, but just the idea, the arrogance that, oh, they're not moving fast enough. I could move so much faster, even though I've never done this before. It's just like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, honestly, one like 1 out of every 20 things he promises comes true, and he's been riding on the success of SpaceX for way too long, okay? And I give
Yeah.
him credit for SpaceX, but, like, everything he promises, people I'm sure there's, like, prediction markets against his promises. There has to be. So, anyway, so back to data centers in space. Elon thinks that you can put them there in 4 to 5 years. Jeff Bezos
Ah.
Jeff Bezos, who also has, a Blue Origin, thinks 10 to 20 years. Elon put out some images of his orbital satellites. This is like how he pitches things to investors to get them all, you know, to get them all aroused about the SpaceX IPO and the potential for data centers in space and blah, blah, blah.
He talks about it like it's already a done deal. You just need to build it, but like all the science and everything is already in place, and then we just need to put it together, and then it's good to go.
You're right. And I don't want to begrudge him that willingness to be like, hey, I have a lofty dream or a goal and I'm going to go
Ambition.
after it because
Yeah.
we do need people like that. We
Oh
want to
yeah.
celebrate people like that. I, I just, I just think that he's a little bit more full of shit. Not just a little bit, a lot more full of shit than he realizes and that the world realizes about him. And
Yeah.
that's where my sort of disdain comes from. It's like, yeah, yeah, okay. Like, why don't you follow through on any of the other promises you made, like getting us to Mars, and then talk about this other crazy shit? But
Hmm.
other things I want to mention about data centers in space is that the FCC put out like a application to allow companies to apply to put these kinds of satellites, which would basically be like data centers in low Earth orbit. And they basically gave like 30 days for people to object to this, which is a very abnormally short window. And a
Yeah.
consortium of astronomers objected to it because they were like, dude, this would ruin astronomy as a study because he wants to put a million of them in low Earth orbit. So this would ruin astronomy because there'd be too much shit in the sky, number
A
one.
million data centers in
A
space.
million, yeah. It would pollute the orbit with space debris because what do you
Junk.
do
Yeah.
when these 4-kilometer long solar panels break? There'd be so much debris, and cleaning that up is not easy or cheap.
No.
And then also another thing that I never thought of is that the launching of all the rockets that it would take to get to 1 million, we don't know what the pollution from the exhaust of those rockets will actually do to the ozone layer. And there are some early studies showing that the launch of rockets is creating holes in the ozone layer, which would
Mm.
obviously accelerate global warming. So this
Yeah.
whole data centers in space thing may not actually be a solution. But we all know nobody gives a shit about the Earth. They can save 2 seconds of latency, off their Pornhub sex doll live stream or whatever. So I think they're probably going to figure out a way to do it. I think 1 million is just like it's just an arbitrary number, but it
Yeah. It's
is
just
but
big
the
talk.
idea of putting more things in low Earth orbit rather than like further away is a problem. And the further away you put it, the higher the latency is, which creates a problem, a different kind of
Hmm.
problem. And plus,
More
it's
costly.
more
It's more
costly.
difficult in
Exactly.
terms of engineering and the
Yeah.
science, materials, everything needed to make it real. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, of course, but I could just imagine the further away from Earth you want to build a zero gravity data center that needs to be kept at the correct temperature and that needs a constant energy supply. I mean, there's a bajillion things that could go
Yeah.
wrong, obviously.
I think people always see like these beautiful images of the Earth from space, satellite imagery, whatever, and it just looks so beautiful. Like there's so much open space. The reality is like if you look at like satellites plotted around the Earth, it's insane. It looks insane already, and this is like with tens of thousands of satellites.
Oh, yeah.
I think SpaceX just got to 10,000. I can't even imagine with a million, and they're like 4 kilometers long. But I do want to talk about Elon for a second because I don't want to sound like look. He has a lot of contemptible parts of his personality, and he
Hmm.
embodies a lot of what's wrong with the world, the glorification and deification of founders, of extreme wealth, of
Hmm.
being completely inconsiderate of your fellow human, of being a
Yes.
bad father. I mean, there's just so many values that he does not possess. And
Yeah.
anyone who's listening to this thinking, no, that's not true. You just don't understand Elon. He really just cares about humanity. Like, prove that. How has he helped humanity? Tesla was supposed to be a green energy company. How's that going? They're not a fucking green energy company, and you know it. Whoever's arguing with me in my head. Like, they're not. That was a dream that he had. That sounded cool. Oh, terraform Mars. Yeah, how's that going?
Hmm.
It's not going anywhere. There's nothing he's doing to help humanity. And data center, if he really cared about the Earth, just with what I said, he would be like, maybe we should have put data centers in space because the ozone layer, but he's going to do it anyway. So there goes your theory, imaginary person that I'm arguing with. But aside from all that, I had that aside there, I do admire his willingness and ambition to take on projects, even if he's not always the first to get there.
Yeah.
I think his frenetic, impatient personality has accelerated the development of SpaceX rockets, the Tesla supercharger network, but so much of his company's innovations are driven by him. At a company like Google or Amazon, innovation is built into the culture of the companies. And so, they know that Sergey Brin cannot lead the innovation of the entirety of Alphabet. They build it in through the culture, through the management, through the performance incentives.
Yeah.
And he has never figured that out. That's why he's never really had a company that manages without him. It's literally all him. Every executive in place is just there to do what he thinks they should do. They don't make their own decision. They don't create their own culture of innovation. And I don't think he's ever really learned how to build a company where he's not the driving force. And that's why this Terafab project, the Optimus robots, the space data centers, honestly, and I'm not rooting for this necessarily, but I think they're all going to fail.
Mm.
Because I think even with somebody who has a frenetic, impatient, do anything to make it work, workaholic personality like him, plus access to basically unlimited capital, you can't be good at that many things. And his track
Yeah.
record precedes him. Yes,
Yeah.
SpaceX is a success. What else has been a success? Don't say Tesla, because I will tell you you're flat out wrong. If Tesla didn't
Tesla.
have, if Tesla didn't have the tax credits that they sell to other automakers, that
Yeah.
is now going away because of the Trump tax bill, they would have lost money last quarter.
Mm.
Lost money in the red.
Okay. So Tesla can't be a part of the argument in terms of like for the
Well,
plus
they
side of the
did
ledger.
well. They were doing well. They were a great company. They had a
Yeah.
great brand. They had a lot of profitability, and then he fucked it up with his insufferable personality. I mean, that is literally what happened. They basically
Yeah.
boycotted Tesla in Europe. It was a beloved company. Even, I think until he showed
Yeah.
his hairy, ugly ass.
He burned a
Yeah.
lot of goodwill because he just had to get involved with the second administration and
Yeah, and
yeah.
really like show who he is. My last point on this is that when this does fail, which I think it will because of what I said, not because he's not a great entrepreneur, not because he's not innovative, but because he is always the driving force of innovation, and that does not scale, not the way that he thinks it does, not
Yeah.
across Tesla, across SpaceX, across xAI, across Neuralink, across
The
whatever
boring
the fuck,
company.
boring company.
You can't do infinity things and be equally good at all of them, I guess.
And it's not going to be an obvious failure when it does happen, because he'll change the narrative just like he did by shrinking the ambitions of SpaceX. Like I said, we're not going to Mars anymore. We're going to terraform the moon. Okay,
Oh, is that
cool. All
something
right,
they
cool.
said they
Oh,
were gonna do?
yeah. Yeah. He said the moon is just a lot more achievable in a shorter time span. I'm paraphrasing. And so we
Yeah.
should do it on the moon. Or like he did with Tesla. Not a car company anymore. No, an AI robotics company. LOL. Which I put in my notes. LOL. That's literally what I wrote. And he has to do these kind of things to justify Tesla's ridiculous valuation. So if he says we're going to build 1 million Optimus robots, which is a dumb name, I'm going to keep saying it's a dumb name. Is there even like a defined use case for these robots? Do we know who's going to fucking buy these? No,
Yeah.
he just wants to build them because that's what he needs to trigger certain compensation incentives in his contract with Tesla. Right? That's
Yeah.
literally what it is. And Tesla's ridiculous valuation is down almost 20% year to date. And that's like when I wrote my notes, probably down even more. It was market selling off like crazy today. And so he just needs to keep coming up with these stories of moonshot bets that the
Hmm.
Tesla's pursuing, even if they never pay off. I mean, he used to
Yeah.
talk about Tesla replacing the power grid with home charging. No one knows what happened to that, Tesla fanboys.
Mike, I know we also wanted to touch about the fact that OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, also just recently killed off one of their other flagship services or products, Sora, which was this video generation app that people could use who had paid for premium access, and just use text prompts to create video snippets. Did you ever try it?
I was like a Sora super fan at first. And don't get me wrong, I already hear the chorus of people being like, how dare you support AI taking over the arts? Listen, I wasn't using Sora to make marketing videos or shit that I was going to, sell to Netflix. I just thought it was hilarious. It was like such a novelty. But that's the thing, it was a novelty. I understand why they killed it, because this was costing them a shitload of money.
Hmm.
They were losing, like, it would cost them like up to $10 to generate a single 10-second video. $5 to $10. So
Ah,
even the people who were paying for videos, it just never would have made economic sense, right?
yeah,
So this was
yeah.
purely like a throw shit at the wall and see what sticks things for OpenAI. And that's kind of been their playbook. My opinion on OpenAI has changed slightly because of their own um, stupidity
Hmm.
and self-inflicted wounds. But
Yeah.
basically, let's just zoom out. What do I think OpenAI's strategy was? Let's say earlier this year, back in January, they were running the Facebook playbook. This is kind of like a Silicon Valley widely accepted growth strategy you could use when you have a shitload of users that you have custody of, and you're basically like dominating the market with getting insane user growth, but you don't want to drive them away by trying to monetize them yet. No. You need to wait until all the competitors have been suffocated out because they either can't raise enough money to keep up with you,
Yeah. Or they
or the network effect, the lack thereof on their platform just kills them off, right?
yeah.
So, and then Facebook would be the last one standing, which they were. And then they start to monetize us slowly and surely, ruining our lives. That's what they were going for. They want it to be like this all in one app with, like, you go to OpenAI or ChatGPT and you can do all these things with it. The key difference is two things that made this not work. Number one, unlike Facebook, they don't have a network effect. It doesn't matter who else is using OpenAI. That doesn't really make the tool more or less valuable for you.
Yeah.
And so they didn't really realize how pronounced that difference in moat that Facebook has over them until February 27th, which is the day that they decided to desperately and opportunistically swoop in and take up the Pentagon deal that they had with Anthropic. Now,
Yeah.
just to
Yes.
remind
Remind
everyone,
people.
do you remember why Anthropic pulled out of that deal, Martin?
Anthropic had a deal with, excuse me. So the Department of Defense were using some tools, some AI tools that were developed by Anthropic. And then the Pentagon basically requested full access to all Anthropic AI systems so that they could use them for the development of autonomous weapons and mass
Mass
surveillance.
surveillance.
Mass surveillance. And the CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, I think his name is, he said,
Mhm.
no, we're standing on principle. We're not agreeing to this, which of course pissed off Pete Hegseth. God, what's his title again? SecDef,
The
of course.
secretary and the undersecretary, Emil Michael.
I love this nickname for Pete Hegseth because he's a known alcoholic. Pete Keg's Breath, which is just perfect. So when Anthropic said no, we're not letting you use our systems for mass surveillance and autonomous weapons, the Department of Defense moved to declare them a risk for the U.S. supply chain,
A
and
supply chain risk, which basically blacklists
yeah,
them from ever having a contract with the US government. And by the
Yeah.
way, the Anthropic just won an injunction against that in
Oh,
court this
yeah.
week. So the U.S. government is not allowed to block them or list them as supply chain risk until
Yeah.
further legal proceedings happen. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
So
yes.
when Anthropic said no, you can't have our full models for these purposes, Sam Altman and OpenAI swooped in and said, "Hey, we'll let you use our models for mass surveillance and autonomous weapons,
Yeah.
whatever."
Yeah.
And scooped up that contract with the DoD. So that's what
Exactly.
happened there.
And that pissed people off. And then what happened after that
Mhm.
was that a
I canceled my
mass exodus of
ChatGPT
users.
Plus.
Me too, actually. And that's the thing.
Fuck
They
them.
didn't just lose, they didn't just get uninstalls. Uninstalls grew by 300% over the daily average rate of uninstalls
Hmm.
the next day. And then over the next week, it stayed elevated at 200% over the daily average. But the
That's
other
pretty good.
most crucial factor was that estimated 1.5 to 2.5 million of those users who left were paying subscribers like you and me. And that really hurt them
Yeah.
because in order for them to maintain this, it's very similar to the way I talk about Elon Musk companies. They had to maintain this growth narrative, this narrative of like, yes, you are becoming the dominant player and all others are chasing you and you have custody of, almost 1 billion weekly active users and you're growing and you will eventually win this war. That completely went off the rails with this. Two and
Yeah.
a half million. It's not just the money because okay, it's $20 a month, 240 times 2.5 million. But that ARR in terms of a multiple that it applied to their valuation was critical
Yeah.
because they just raised and they just added $10 billion to this round. So now the total round of the funding that they just raised is 120 billion at a $730 billion valuation. And the goal with that is that's a very high multiple on their revenue. I mean, they're not profitable, so it's just a multiple on revenue of roughly $20 billion annual run rate. For them to maintain that kind of multiple, which is like insane, there needs to be like a pristine story. And now it's not. Just a couple more details about this is that
Yeah.
they had a licensing agreement with Disney, which I thought was a done deal. But it turns out Disney was totally blindsided. So OpenAI was going to pay them $1 billion fee, like a flat fee for like licensing their IP, so that we talked about this, right? So people could make like videos of Mickey like smoking a blunt and like
Yeah.
like
Disney
like,
characters being used in the outputs of
yeah.
OpenAI products.
Many doing pole dancing or whatever. Like I assume that's what was going to happen. And
Hot.
apparently that deal was not inked. And what I read is that Disney executives are actually having a meeting about this the day before they announced it. They just pulled the plug without even telling them. So the deal was never
Mm-mm.
really inked. And that is not a great look because you're
No.
burning a big bridge with that, and you're trying to be like a world leading company. It says a lot about that. But the key thing here is that it's not that hard to switch to a new AI tool. And by the way, this isn't like the first thing that Sam Altman has done to degrade his company's image. This was just the last straw for a lot of people. My
Yeah.
opinion, it started. I started kind of noticing weird behaviors from him around the time of the Super Bowl when the Anthropic put out those ads that were basically ripping ChatGPT for wanting to run ads within ChatGPT. And the way he
Yes.
handled it was just like kind of classless. Like he didn't really take it well. Like, dude, just be classy about it. I get that you don't like it, but you can't come off that way. And then I remember there was an interview he was doing where somebody was asking him, how's OpenAI going to pay for over $1 trillion in computing commitments with I don't know, $15 billion in revenue at that time. And
Yeah.
he just answered it like such an asshole. He was just like really dismissive. He was like, you know what? If anyone doesn't want their shares, I'll find a buyer for them or whatever. And I was like, whoa, dude. Like he was just like exasperated. Like, I can't handle this kind of question. When you look at who the CEO is, you kind of understand what the company is and who the company is. That is kind of
Yeah.
like their persona, which is the
Right.
difference in value add between a good CEO that can cultivate a great public image and one that can't. Then the other thing that he did was when he got on stage and started talking about how it takes longer to train a human to be intelligent and uses more energy than it does an AI model. And it's just like I don't know. Like if I thought about it, maybe there's some kind of thought experiment there that we could talk about if we were at a bar in Silicon Valley, and that would be an interesting conversation to debate that. But you saying that publicly, you sound like completely out of touch. So
I
anyway, it was a
know.
long
Okay,
line of
so
things
I
that he
just want
did.
to. Yeah, so I know what he said about how like the resources to train a human, whatever. Um, I know that came across as just like incredibly insensitive and tone deaf and just idiotic. I do want to point out that I did hear an interesting weighing in on that from my friend Artie, who does work with AI, and he pointed out something that I did not think about. So, in any case, there are people who didn't see his comment in the worst of lights, but he had to have known, or he should have known, that people would have seen that as just like completely fucking tone deaf.
It's something you just shouldn't touch. Don't touch it. Right?
Yeah,
It's like a World War
it's
II
an electric
landmine. Don't fucking
fence.
touch it.
It's
Yeah.
an
So there you
electric
go.
fence. Yeah,
Don't touch it. Okay, I was talking about how easy it is to switch from AI tool to AI tool, right?
yeah, it was painless.
Generally speaking, the favorability of Meta is negative, right? It's like, I mean, 73% of Americans say they don't trust the company to protect their personal information. They just have a very negative rating.
73%.
73%. I mean,
Yeah.
because when have they ever acted that way? They just don't, right? We know that they're a bad actor. But despite that, because of what I was talking about, the network effect and the switching
Mm.
costs, there is no alternative to Instagram. And so Instagram, like I mentioned earlier, still growing, and 60% access it daily. And that's with 3 billion monthly active users. Because they don't have that same moat that Instagram has, they need to have the best PR team and fucking put a fucking tape over this guy's mouth so that he stops pissing off users. I don't know if there is coming back from this. I think it may have just been like a tipping point for them. I mean, look, their user base is still growing, but to lose 2.5 million subscribers, like these are like the early adopters, like
Yeah.
me, like you, to
Yeah.
lose 2.5 million, it's tough. Sorry, last thing I'll say is they are trying to make a move into the enterprise, but that's a crowded space. You got Google there has a foothold, and
Yeah.
Anthropic has been doing it since the beginning, and
Yeah.
Microsoft, which is OpenAI's biggest distribution partner, owns the enterprise. Microsoft is the dominant player in enterprise. And
Yeah.
by the way, Microsoft just started including Anthropic models in Copilot. So, oops, there may not be any way to come back from this. But
That's gotta hurt.
as long as they can keep raising money, I think they can stick it out for a while. But it's tough right now to be OpenAI, and it's all self-inflicted.
I met his mom. Did you know that?
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I took professional headshots of Sam Altman's mom.
Cool.
Yeah,
She nice?
she's nice. She is she's now retired, but she is a dermatologist in St. Louis.
Oh shit.
Yep.
That's a hell of dude. That's a flex. Well,
What a
maybe it
connection.
was a flex.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, if
Yeah.
she's nice, listen, you can't judge parents by their kids.
No.
That's not fair. Because one day, if I do that, one day I know like karma will pay me back. My son will be an incorrigible little shit. And if I would not want people to look at me and be like, you were his dad?
You motherfucker.
You must be even worse. That poor kid is a victim of you. Okay, so NVIDIA released graphic scaling technology called DLSS5, which they use to showcase its ability to create graphic enhancements of video game characters, especially older video games, which people call a yassified style. I don't really understand. I'm not young enough to understand that. But basically, it
what
drew
it
a lot
means,
of backlash. Now, if I look at the images of before and after, they do look better. But I just think there's such a gag reflex for gamers to see AI use in any of their games. In fact, this one game that won Indie Game of the Year got its award revoked because there was like one background image that they mistakenly left in there that was made using AI. So like there's a huge
shit.
allergy to AI in the gaming world. Now,
Yeah.
gamers, listen, I game a lot, but I don't consider myself a gamer because I'm not really like part of that community. Okay, you can tell. Gamers don't look like me. Anyway,
I don't know. You did pin yourself as a neckbeard at the start of this episode, so
now I'm proud of it. Anyway, gamers tend to be very like pro creativity, pro like artist, and a little sanctimonious. I'm just gonna say a little sanctimonious, in my opinion. Now, Related news, Epic Games, which is the maker of Fortnite, they just announced they're doing 1,000 layoffs. And the CEO, Tim Sweeney, said it's just too difficult to be profitable given the drop in Fortnite engagement that started at the end of last year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not all games are the same business model as Fortnite. Fortnite is free to play and it relies on people playing and buying shit from the game electively to support it. But the point is that if one of the biggest games by one of the biggest game makers, Epic Games, can't be profitable, basically the model of Fortnite is to keep coming up with new stuff, new themes every season, and et cetera, to get
Yeah.
people hooked in.
Right.
If it's too expensive for them to keep running that model, they're going to have things like AI to help alleviate some of those costs. They're
Yeah, of
already
course.
starting to move some of the creation of like new skins and stuff like that to be like user generated content. Just think about like how much it costs to make like a $30 skin. You need a studio needs like dozens of lighting artists and technical directors just to get the shadows and reflections right. But Nvidia's DLSS 5 can do all of that. It and so large game studios are not going to have a choice. They're going to have to start using AI because if they don't,
They're
then
gonna
a
get it.
company like Epic Games is going to always be at a disadvantage to an indie game studio because they can reach top tier studio quality with NVIDIA products and release top tier games for half the development cost. And eventually, large game studios are going to be forced to cut their own costs and timelines just to keep up. So this kind of reminds me of what's going on, and I want to get your thoughts on this because you're a film buff. You studied film, but this kind of reminds me of what's happening in Hollywood. Like, why
Yeah.
have 20 costume designers or lighting experts, balloon the production cost of a film that might just flop anyway? And
Yeah.
that's how games are too. You might spend $100 million and it might be a flop. And if you could reduce that risk exposure, I mean, there is some benefit to that. I'm not saying everything should be AI. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you have these two competing kind of intuitions or two competing interests of people who work in these industries: risk exposure versus maintaining the ability for real people to keep real jobs, right? And so, do we reduce the cost by relying on AI and producing a product that we think is okay to release, or do we use people just because we think it's the right thing to do to make sure that these people have a paid gig to come to? And so these things are in tension with each other, and I think I don't know how to resolve it, because I understand the people who want to create stuff, but they want to reduce their financial risk by trying to make something. But then I also think a lot of people are just allergic to going to watch a movie that's produced totally or partially by AI. They're like, this is not interesting. It kind of goes against something in our psyche that says, I want to see the creative output of a person, of another human who's like me, but who's maybe a little bit different. They have different ideas, or they, come up with something that's really interesting and speaks to some universal part of all of us. And if all that's just kind of churned through the meat grinder of AI and spit out at some simulacrum, then it loses something that makes it interesting to people. And so I don't know how it resolves itself eventually, but right now you have these two competing kind of things that are butting up against each other, and I don't know who's going to win. But
I'm a little
it's
bit
happening
more
in gaming
cynical.
and it's happening in movies. So yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little bit more cynical in the sense that I don't see a great game or a great movie just being made by AI. That is always going to be garbage, and the potential audience will treat it as such. Even just like knowing that something's fully made by AI would just be a turnoff. But the limited uses of AI to like I said, get shadow and lighting right and stuff like that, to me, that's really not fundamentally different than just like the other tools that people use, the digital tools that people use to make those enhancements anyway. They're still using tools, they're just human directed tools instead of whereas AI is a little bit more machine directed and a little bit less human directed. So
But there's some
if the,
tipping point there. Like, are you starting to leave the creative decisions up to the AI? Like, when does it become AI dominated and the human becomes more and more removed from the equation?
do you think that you're right? And I think about that even in my own work, which has nothing to do with anything creative, but do you think that that will kind of show itself? Like, it will reveal itself which one had a lot more human thought and creative direction put into it, and which one didn't, even if both option A and option B had used AI to enhance it. I feel like if you just let the AI do it and fine, you save money, but you know the final product will look like shit. It will just be shittier than if a human used AI to help make some enhancements, but ultimately they had the final say over what
Mm,
was put out. I feel like in some sense it's sort of like the invisible hand and the free market will decide that. Like you'll be able to tell if something's AI, and the stuff that's like maybe uses some AI, but you like reduce the timeline to release a game and reduce the production cost significantly so that studio can stay afloat, but it's not all AI. Maybe that's okay. Like I guess I don't understand why there's 100% gag reflex to anything AI, and I have to think
mm.
that it's more to do about how people feel about AI in general than the specifics of using AI to help enhance some graphics or something in a game.
Yeah, I don't know how it's going to play out. It's one of those things where I think I'm just going to have to like sit back and see what people prefer.
But how do you feel though?
I think I would personally prefer. I don't play a lot of games. I have a PS5, but I think at least for movies, which I'm very passionate about, movies and filmmaking, I think I would always prefer to watch a movie, even if it or I prefer to watch a movie that's just made by people, because for some reason it just feels more relatable and more interesting by virtue of that human spark of creativity, as opposed to some approximation of that human spark as produced by a computer.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Oh, well, how about this? Consider this, the flip side of this is that this will lower the barrier to entry for upstart studios in movies and in gaming. We know the cost of producing a game is very high. The
Yeah,
cost of producing a Hollywood box office hit is very high, and that has
yeah,
naturally kept the powers of hit movie making to an oligopoly of a handful of companies, which
yeah,
is why studios are consolidating and gaming studios are consolidating. And
yeah,
so, in a sense, if you look at it in the positive way, this will kind of be like the great equalizer because it lowers the bar for those studios. Now you get more creativity as competition, and the
yeah.
best creativity will win. But right now, we're only seeing the creativity of the few, and it's not actually the most competitive landscape for creativity. If you actually lower the production costs, now anyone who's creative can come up with things, and that should be better in some way. I think that there's a downside to that potentially, which is you're kind of seeing now, like on Steam, with a lot of indie game developers, where there's like a flood of AI slop on there, and then it's kind of hard to tell what's good and what's bad. Okay, some games are no AI, some are AI slop, and some are maybe in the middle. And which one's good? And as a consumer, it's like really hard to tell the difference. I think in those cases, it's up to the platforms to suppress the trash, surface the gold stuff, but also maybe to label games like the same way you label, cruelty-free makeup or free-range eggs. Like this is
Like, this was produced by humans. No generative AI was used in the making of this artistic product,
what do
game,
you
movie, whatever.
what do you think about that democratization of creativity in like film? Let's just talk about films, if that's what you're more familiar with. Like, do you think that that's a worthwhile flip side to this?
Yes, I think it's worthwhile in the sense of opening up kind of the space of making movies that can reach more people to a wider kind of bench of people who want to make films, but now they can finally afford to try to make something using AI. I don't know if it's necessarily going to translate into well, maybe it can if they use some, or if they create something that's good enough, it will find its audience and have some modicum of success. But I don't know. I can really only go off of what I think myself, and I don't know. Maybe things get so good that it becomes virtually indistinguishable, AI versus real stuff that's filmed in the real world. But when I look at AI generated video now, it has this glossy kind of fake sheen to it, and it makes me go, it looks good, but I can tell it was made by a computer. And that makes me become a little bit less interested. But the democratization of filmmaking tools and the process of making movies Yeah, it's interesting. You can maybe bring more creative people into the fold who otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to make something. But I don't know if it necessarily translates to audiences showing up.
Yeah. I guess one way to look at it is that it's inevitable that it's going to happen
Yeah,
because it's like when it's just sticking to games for a second. It's like when games started, all being connected to the internet and selling like microtransactions and shit and whatever, subscriptions and battle passes and whatever the fuck. Like, we knew that was when that started happening, it was going to keep happening. And of course, people hated it, but there was some positives to it. Like, one of the worst offenders is a game called NBA 2K. They have a monopoly on licensed NBA video games pretty much because nobody else has I don't think anybody else has a license with the NBA. So because of that, they make a new game every year with updated players and rosters and whatever. You can tell I bought this game many times in my life since I was like 12 years old. And basically they've made it intentionally like in order for you to up level and save yourself hours of tedious bullshit to like up level your character that you can like role play as, you can pay. That's
yeah.
it. You don't have to, but you could pay. Anyway, they're one of the worst offenders, but in general, for most games, it has led to them having an incentive to produce new stuff, expansion packs, and new seasons with new themes. Like Diablo is one of them, and Diablo's made by Blizzard, which is owned by Microsoft actually, but a huge game maker. And so like you wouldn't have had that otherwise. In the past, you bought a game for $50 and then that was it. You waited until they released the next one, if they ever did. So I guess what I'm saying is like it's inevitable, and so maybe we might as well focus on the positives because I'm not saying it should be 100% replaced by AI, but I do think that like people are sharp enough to see the difference, and those ones will naturally be suppressed because we're just not going to want to watch that crap, and the platforms hopefully will suppress them.
Mm, okay. Yeah, I hope you're right.
Okay, thank you for watching and listening to episode 3 of Hogwash with Mike the Lummox and Martin Totland. We really appreciate all of you who've been listening and watching and all the feedback you've given us.
Yes.
It's
Thank you.
been honestly really heartwarming because people who, maybe I know as acquaintances are just like, wow, you guys are so good together. And we really like the way you guys connect and it just felt so professional. And we're not like we're just a couple of dudes, a couple of friends doing this, and we do take it seriously though, and I'm just really glad that shows up. So, thank you. We love you.
Yeah, thanks to everybody who's been sending positive feedback or constructive feedback for how we can improve this. We're still open to any constructive critiques that you have of the show. Please reach out to us at Hogwash Pod on all social media. And yeah, we would love to hear from you. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
We love you. Did I say that? Okay, Martin, tell us about the murder story. That's a weird way to say it. Let me start again.